All right, everybody, welcome back to the Text Lab. It is a Tuesday morning. Todd, if you've lost track of what day of the week it is.
It's hard to keep track.
It's at 10:30 a.m. You're at Vintage Grace yourself. I know your watch gives you some of these notifications.
Is this Northern California still?
Northern California.
Thank you for the clarity.
And we're at Vintage Grace in the green room, recording the Text Lab like we do every single week. Big news this week, Todd. The Dodgers, the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Brooklyn Dodgers, as you probably knew them in your childhood in the early 1920s and 30s, they won the World Series.
The Baseball World Series?
The Baseball World Series.
My team won?
Your team won, Todd.
Oh, man, that's good news.
Exciting news.
I feel great now.
Excited to get another World Series win in there.
Oh, yeah. We've got plenty of them.
They do have quite a few. They've been on a great run. Dynasty.
2 years in a row. There's a lot of people saying potentially three-peat.
Potentially. We'll have to wait and see for next year.
Oh, would that be great to have that in the service again 3 years in a row?
Yeah. I also am a Dodgers fan. Little known fact.
You don't share
I'm a
that?
mild Dodgers fan.
Why don't you share that more with all these Giant fans that you are a passionate Dodger fan?
Nothing brings me more joy than seeing people give you a lot of hate mail for being a Dodgers fan, and I just stand off to the side and smile and watch the show.
Everybody knows you're way smarter than me.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's a perfect lead-in to the text that we are in, listener, viewer, because
baseball into this.
Baseball in the big inning. Yeah, we'll talk about that baseball joke later, but Jesus here is laying out really this choice that every single person has to make. This is what kind of all of Matthew 12 has been, this choice. And Matthew, in the author's intent, we're always trying to look at what is the author communicating. He is contrasting the Pharisees and the crowds, their response to Jesus. Verse 14, the Pharisees go out. They conspire now to how to try to destroy Jesus, is how Matthew puts it. And this choice continues to get laid out. This was kind of what you had hit this last Sunday in your sermon. I was sleeping through it, but I heard it was pretty good. About everybody has to make this choice. There's no neutral, there's no neutrality in this. I can't just stand on the sidelines like I like to do with you. When it comes to following Jesus, every person must make a choice and a declaration of their allegiance. From just a big picture viewpoint, logic and flow in Matthew 12. Anything else to add to that as you kind of
you did a great job.
See us coming into verse 33 here. And so we are in Matthew 12, 33 through 37. Let me read this for us and we will dive into the text. Jesus says this, he says, make a tree good and its fruit will be good, or make a tree bad and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you who are evil say anything good? For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of, and a good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. But I tell you that everyone will have to give account on the day of judgment for every empty word that they have spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. Todd, I love where we usually start in this podcast is just taking a look at what is just the big idea of the text. As I wrote that out for myself, this was kind of what I had come up with, was choose wisely because everything is at stake. That's kind of where I see Jesus going with this text. What would you say as you think about big idea of this text?
Well, I think the big idea is really found in verse 34, and he's going to build to that, and he's going to move away from it. Now, what version I'm using? The ESV. Yours was a little different. It was a little different, which is cool. Same ideas, but in the ESV it says, I think pretty clearly, for out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. Mm-hmm. So he's making this comparison again about fruit and trees and all that stuff. But there's some text in here that could make that a little confusing. Yeah, and we could interpret some of these phrases at the beginning and the end a little differently if we don't see what Jesus is talking about here is what you treasure, our works, our words, whatever you treasure, whatever we do and whatever we say is actually going to flow from our heart. That feels like, to me, the big idea. Yep. So you want to keep focusing on the heart, but again, the other stuff is going to tell you a lot about your heart, how you speak. Yeah,
well, and I love that emphasis in here as the big idea because it also builds on what Jesus did in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, where he's talking about it's not about just not murdering your brother. That's not like the goal is the lowest common denominator. Hey, I at least didn't kill Todd this week. That's a win. He's talking about it's
you were tempted.
Yeah, I was tempted to over and over again. That's something on my OST journey. But Jesus is saying it's about actually the anger that's in your heart. It's not about just committing adultery. It's with dealing with the lust that's actually in your heart. It's with dealing with what is beneath the surface. And here I think he kind of repeats some of those big picture ideas.
It's crazy how he has
Matthew.
this same thought like through everything
Incredible.
he says.
Incredible.
He cares about the heart.
He cares about the heart.
What's going on in our head and heart. Crazy what this Christianity actually is that, again, for at least me growing up, it feels like we don't always keep our eyes focused on that.
Yep. And I think, reader, as you're working through Matthew, just to notice repetition that's in the text. Those are ideas that Matthew is intentionally trying to point out to us as he looks at all these different things Jesus did and taught. Book of John talks about there's not enough books to fill them with, but Matthew here is constructing something for us, and he's highlighting this, that, like you said, in verse 34, that it is out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. And Jesus then links that in verse 33. He starts with, make a tree good and its fruit will be good. Make a tree bad and its fruit will be bad, for a tree is recognized by its fruit. I think there's some imagery there even coming to mind of just trees in Scripture, places that shows up. I think about a Psalm 1, which is a tree by water that always bears fruit. I think of Jeremiah 17, another place where a tree is mentioned that does not fail to produce fruit even in these seasons of desert and even being in the wilderness. And so Jesus here is talking about getting to the root of a tree, getting to the root of your life. And if that process happens where this root is made good and the tree is made good, it will inevitably produce good fruit. And you really contrast that with the Pharisees, where he calls a brood of vipers. Like, Jesus does not hold back here when talking about the evil that is coming out of their hearts, and then how their mouth speaks and reflects that that's going on there. As you think about, Todd, even how that process happens. We talk about that as like OST here at Vintage, a lot of an ongoing spiritual transformation. Sometimes people's life might be like, man, I look at the tree, the fruit of my life, and it's not where I want it to be. Or my mouth is speaking and it's reflecting in my heart, but it's not where I want it to be. Where does somebody start on an OST journey? On a treasure journey? Where do you even start that?
Well, I think it's always with looking at Jesus, but that's where you have some verbiage in here that I think could be confusing if we don't see it in the logic and the flow.
Yeah.
You start with verse 33, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad. Just the way Jesus verbalizes. If you, again, don't see the logic and the flow, it could be appearing that we're supposed to be producing fruit out of just intentionality. And that's how, if we miss the logic and the flow, it's out of the heart, right? Yeah. Because I think what he's emphasizing here is, don't try and put good fruit on your tree. Don't just try and glue, if you're a lemon tree, glue apples to you. It doesn't work. What he's suggesting is, after coming out of the text before where he ended again in judgment, but you still have time to make a choice here about Jesus, right? Yeah. I think that's what he's trying to emphasize here. So make the right choice in your head and in your heart, and it's going to produce the fruit. And I'm not sure that's a real answer to the question.
Yeah. No,
but you got a phrase here that I think could be misunderstood in the same way when we get to the last paragraph. If we don't see this in the context of everything that's been written in 12 chapters here before, and where we're going to go, and particularly verse 34 here, it's out of the heart. So he's not trying to say, just try and produce, just the old Nike commercial, right? Just do it. Just be, and that's a little bit of the theology I grew up with, right? It doesn't matter what you're feeling in your heart. Just do the right thing. Just do the loving thing. And that's not what Jesus is trying to promote here. And I think that's important, so that our loving acts actually are God glorifying, and he's getting credit for them. Because God cares everything about the motives.
And I think, building on what you just said, there may even be, for our listeners, viewers, you may have grown up in an environment like this where that was kind of what you experienced the gospel as. Was like, okay, I bought some fire insurance, now I'm supposed to just kind of try to be a good person. And it was a Nike just do it type of mentality, a box checking Christianity, kind of a works-based even salvation, or even kind of a moralism would be a term to kind of frame that as, of like, you're just trying to be a moral person. You're just trying to check that box. And it actually is really the opposite of what Jesus is saying in the Sermon on the Mount. He's saying this isn't about box checking morality. The Pharisees had that down. They were doing phenomenal in certain ways at box checking, creating really all these different layers around the law to make sure they didn't break the law on Sabbath. But Jesus is saying, no, I love how you just put that. Your intentions actually really do matter. The place that this is coming from actually does matter. And that's even what Jesus is after here. That's what he is pursuing, is a change of the heart. And he talks about that in verse 33, that something core has to happen. Making this tree good, that has to actually be changed. You can't just kind of patch this up and put this on the outside.
Very well
Something
said.
deeper has to actually happen there.
How you're living and how you're talking, we're going to get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
It is a great way for us to make an assessment of what's at the heart. If he's again at the throne of our heart, it's going to look very different, our lives, than if he's not on the throne of our heart.
Yes, and he repeats this in verse 35, where Matthew very intentionally uses repetition here again, where he's like, the good person out of his good treasure brings forth good. The evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. Like, there's almost just this repeated parallelism idea here of like, good is going to come out of your heart, and because there actually is a good center, good roots to the tree, or evil will be the thing that comes out.
And the logic and the flow of this, again, is not just good as human beings, right?
Yeah.
Or just as evil as human beings, where a lot of people could use that phrase and I think apply very generally. Good in this context, logic and the flow, is those from the earlier paragraph who are with Jesus.
Yes.
Those who have decided that, and they have aligned themselves wholeheartedly with them. That's what good here is. Those who recognize Jesus for who he is, and not just identify it, but actually embrace him and love him with their whole heart.
Yep. This is where, and I think this could be a great question to discuss, is where I see a little bit more of a broader theological principle, like of a passage like this takes me to almost a Romans 5-8, where Paul then is talking about, if the same Spirit that lives in you now that lived in Jesus, he will give you life. There's this newness. And so it feels like Jesus is almost hinting and pointing to the foundation of this new covenant that is coming, this reality of this full new life. And even thinking about Paul in Galatians 5, that's then talking about the fruit of the Spirit. There's a new way that's by the Spirit, not by the law, not by your own effort, not by anything that you can do, that now the Spirit lives in you. Something foundational, something core has changed.
You've been radically transformed.
Yeah.
You've been, to use our language around here, you've been justified through genuine faith.
Yeah.
And ongoing spiritual transformation is a great place to point it, is an inevitable byproduct of that coming to Jesus.
Yep.
And you should see it.
Yeah.
It will be evident if Jesus is on the throne of your life.
And this really then even takes us to a place of joy and the pursuit of joy
I love
in
that
our
word.
life. I know you love that word, and I early on at Vintage was doing the work to process through. Okay, what do we mean by that? And how? Because I've actually even heard people slap on joy in a very moralistic type of way, like, "Hey, don't you know Galatians 4:7 says don't be anxious about anything? If you're anxious, that's a sin." Like, just kind of actually willpower your way to even joy. One of the fruit of the Spirit is joy. Paul talks about that. 1 Thessalonians 5, be joyful always. So it's like you can almost like try to actually willpower your way there. These are these places where Jesus is saying, no, this is going to come out of a changed heart. This is going to come out of a changed affections. And often when we're talking about sin, we're talking about settling for lesser joys. It's trying to get to the root of, where do I actually find joy? What do I actually love? What actually is my affections? And that's going to be this deeper journey, I think, that people are invited into. That's going to be this deeper change and transformation for them to go on to actually do the hard work. Because, I mean, it's scary a lot of times. Yeah, nobody usually wakes up in the morning and says, I really want to sin today. I think the thing I want to do is blow up my life. But it just comes out of us. And there's this process then of Jesus, I think, saying, let's get to the root of that tree. Let's actually wrestle with what is actually your true joy. What do you actually delight in? What do you actually love? And then that is going to lead to a transformed life. And he seems to just really be pointing to, you have to get to that starting place of joy. Everything else is going to flow from that.
It is. And again, it's flowing. He's not referencing, I don't think, particularly what we would call ongoing spiritual transformation here. We know theologically that's the byproduct. That's the good fruit. He's just still trying to get these people to choose him. Matthew's goal in writing this letter is just to get people to choose him. This is the way life changes. And now for those of us who have already got Jesus on the throne of our heart, then again, the application is, how do we get more of that joy? And we wrestle with it. I don't know if you know, but I'm still tempted by sinful things.
Yes.
Satan puts puts this immediate pleasure in front of me, and I try to go, oh man, this is going to cost me something. Lord, give me the power, and I don't always succeed like I would like, right? But that's where God's grace is there, and Jesus, oh man, he just loves us.
Yeah, yep. And he is incredibly clear here in verse 36 even to say, hey, somebody's going to win the World Series and somebody's going to lose the World Series. There is this choice that you have to make. You have to respond to who I am. In verse 36, where he tells us, I tell you on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. What do you think Jesus is trying to emphasize to his listeners there? What is Matthew trying to point to even to his audience in verse 36?
Well, I think he's going to be focusing on our speech, because that's a big part of all of our life. But it's beyond that. It's just what comes out of us. How do we live? What are our how do our values get expressed? Because I don't think we talk about that much in this world, but we're accountable for all of them. Everything. God is conscious and aware of everything. Now, hopefully, as those who have been transformed by Christ, that encourages us.
Right.
Even the good thoughts that don't get expressed, he's there and he's aware of our hearts. But he's again here talking to people that he's trying to get them to choose him. And he's trying to help them understand, you don't choose me. Everything you've done, everything you've said, you will give an account for.
Yeah. And there's a connection there that he makes between your words and actually your belief in your worldview. I totally agree. Our culture tries to separate those things.
It does.
It works incredibly hard to say that like words don't matter in a Twitter world, in a social media world. And Jesus is saying, no, your words reveal your heart. They reveal actually what you love the most and also truly what you believe, who you believe in or not. And so your words do matter. They do have weight. God is aware and knows your words. And so I think that is a piece to actually take stock of actually how do I speak? What words do I use? But then also your words are a mirror to the soul. What do I actually believe? Am I trusting and treasuring Jesus? Am I coming to him in a desperate, dependent state? Coming to him to be healed. Like Jesus has just healed a man possessed by a demon. And I think that's kind of the metaphor if you look in verse 35 where he talks about the good things that are coming out of you or the evil coming out of you. And Jesus there is saying your words matter. They're connected to the heart. And so
and it's, I think, particularly connected to last week's text, where you got the Pharisees looking at Jesus and accusing him of working for Satan by healing these guys. And I think that's part of the reason here why Matthew puts the words here. It's all our works that are included in this idea, but particularly words. They're accusing him of working for Satan. And Jesus is trying to help us understand that's a big deal.
Totally.
And what those words from the Pharisees reveal is where their hearts are, where though they're the leaders supposedly speaking on behalf of God, they are getting this completely wrong. Because that's where you get to that next phrase, for out of your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Like the first few words in this passage, they could be misunderstood if we don't see it in the logic and the flow. These words here are just still an illustration from verse 34. Out of the abundance of the heart comes our words. So we don't want to mishear either. This is not about being condemned. It's the words being a symptom, right? And evidence of where the heart is. The problem is the heart, always.
And it feels like Matthew is just addressing again kind of what Jesus said last week, where he's like, a house divided cannot stand.
Absolutely.
Look at just actually the proof is in the pudding here of the Pharisees' actions.
I love pudding.
I know you do. And look at their actions, look at their words. Good will come out of good, evil will come out of an evil heart. And so let's get to the matter of the issue. Let's get to the heart of it. And that's what actually matters. As you wrap all of this together and kind of think about going from the big idea, the logic and flow, what's going on in their town, to then bringing it to our town, thinking about implications for us on a Monday through Saturday, Monday through Sunday, just a level here. What sticks out to you as just kind of personal application, implication?
I mean, one of the most obvious is just the consequence of our words. I mean, Jesus is saying here how we speak. Now, it's how we live in all kinds of ways, but specifically here in this historical context, just our words with what the Pharisees have said. There's enormous consequences with our words. I think we're in a culture, I mean, what's going on with social media right now? I've had friends post things that didn't feel like to me always were God glorifying, not that thoughtful, as though as you've put it out on the internet that these things don't have that much significance in that meaning. In our speech everywhere we go, right? That we're careful with our words.
Yeah.
We want our words. We want to be intentional with our words, but the words are revealing where our heart is, and we're hoping and trusting and hoping we're growing in more and more of that, reflecting God's grace and His love.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I think for me, that connection between words and the heart, and Jesus here, just as He does always, as all of Scripture does, says motives matter. Get to the heart of it. If this is coming from a place of joy, or if this is coming from a place of just box checking, kind of moralistic duty, those are two completely different things. I think especially I grew up in that context. I literally remember being a 7th grader writing out this like moral checklist, to-do list of like what I needed to do to crush being a good Christian. And Jesus is pursuing something different. He's after something different. He's after something. He's after the heart. He's after our affections. And so to me, that idea still captivates me to this day.
That's cool.
That's what this is about. This is about joy. This is about a transformed heart. Living into the newness of that. Jesus doesn't go all the way there. He is talking about just look, see, and respond, but he's pointing to it. He's pointing to this new covenant, spirit-driven life that produces the fruit of the Spirit, and that's a joy-filled journey. That is a journey to continue to pursue that joy every single day. And when you see that it's not there, when you see your depravity that's in your heart, let that take you closer to Christ. I think that's one thing that I would say for our listeners. Let that just be a place to come back, to repent again over and over again, to acknowledge your desperate dependence, and to continue to pursue the joy.
Growing in our experience of His love. I don't know any place else to go other than, Lord, again, fill me with more of your love. Because I grew up, I remember my mother, so well-intended. Sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt me. And I know she meant it so well, but I'll tell you, it's just wrong. I'm old now,
not
man.
True.
I'm going to tell you, sticks and stone have done far less damage to everybody I know, including me, than words. You know, a harsh word and something critical that's unnecessary, unwarranted. Oh, the damage that gets done when we say things to other people, because words are consequential. They reveal what's in our head, and they reveal what's in our heart.
I love it. Words are consequential. Such good stuff, Todd. Thanks for being on the pod, man.
I love doing this, and I didn't know you were a Dodger fan.
Hey, now
so
you know.
So for all of those who despise me because I'm a Dodger fan, I'd like you to give equal focus to my brother David.
Send those emails, toddc@vintagegrace.org. Continue to give him the crap and the hate mail. That brings me joy.
It does. I do understand that. Thank
Love you, man.
Love
Join us
you,
next
big
week
boy.
again for the Text Lab. We'll see you next time.